Nation-state concept. First thing I want to do is identify what a nation-state means. It is a state whose territory corresponds to that occupied by a particular ethnicity that has been transformed into a nationality. So it's a state that's created around a particular ethnic group that has been made into a nationality, actually. Now there's three different sections we're going to look at in regards to nation-state concept. The first is the ancient state. The ancient state's looking at the Middle East and at the Fertile Crescent. The Nile River Valley, as well as the Mediterranean Sea, is sometimes viewed as an extension of the Fertile Crescent. That's all this area incorporated together is what we're looking at. The first states that evolved were what's called city-states, which are sovereign states that comprises a town and the surrounding countryside. Walls are clearly delineated the boundaries of the city, and outside these walls, the city controlled agricultural land. This land was not only used for economic purposes, but it's also an outer line of defense against attack from other city-states. Some of the empires that we saw exist because of city-states from Mesopotamia are the Sumerians, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, and the Persians. The medieval state. Political unity reached its height during the Roman Empire, which collapsed in the 5th century after basically it got way too big. A handful of kings emerged as rulers all over European estates. The consolidation of neighboring estates formed our modern-day states such as England, France, and Spain. The nation-states in Europe. To preserve and enhance distinctive cultural characteristics, ethnicities seek to govern themselves without interference from other places. A nation-state is a state whose territory corresponds to that occupied by a particular element or a particular ethnicity. The concept that ethnicities have the right to govern themselves is referred to as self-determination. That's what this is referring to. The movement to identify nationalities on languages spread elsewhere in Europe during the 20th centuries. After World War I, at the Versailles Peace Conference, they used languages as the main criterion in creating new states in Europe. It's very important that you understand that after the Treaty of Versailles, at the Versailles Peace Conference, they used languages to redraw the boundaries of Europe. Spatial relationships between ethnicity, economy, and gender. There's two terms I want to differentiate between. One is multi-ethnic, which is a state that contains more than one ethnicity, and then multinational state, which is a country that contains more than one ethnicity with traditions of self-determination. So it's groups of people that have the ability to, or at least they feel they have the ability to run a government themselves. The Soviet Union was the best example, and Russia is still today's best example of a multinational state. It's the world's largest multinational state because you have a bunch of ethnicities that would like to be left alone and to have their own government, but they're not letting that happen. Nation states in Europe. There's two I want to look at, Denmark and Slovenia. The first is Denmark. 90% of people living in Denmark are what's called Danes, and they have a strong sense of unity among the Danes. Nearly all people speak Danish. That leaves a 10% ethnic minority group, and this is mainly guest workers from Turkey and refugees from ethnic cleansing of Yugoslavia. So it's predominantly one ethnic group. It's a nation state. There's two territories of Denmark, the Faroe Islands and Greenland, where ethnic Danes do not live, but the landmass of Denmark itself is a nation state. Slovenia was a former republic from Yugoslavia and became independent in 1991. 83% of people in Slovenia are Slovenes. That population percentage is actually declining, but they're still a nation state. They have a 90-member National Assembly, and they always reserve one seat to each ethnic group of Hungarian and Italian ethnic group. The boundary changes after World War II. After the Paris Peace Conference redrew the boundaries, there were more Slovenes in Italy and more Italians in Slovenia because of the redrawing of the boundaries. And this ethnic group actually changed, the nation state of this ethnic group actually changed as the boundaries shifted. Nation states and ethnic identity. Karl Marx was the first one to really look at this. He said that nationalism was a means for the dominant classes to maintain power over workers, and he believed that actually workers would identify with one another, and instead of ethnicity, that these workers would actually group together in regards to nation states and their formations. The breakup of the Soviet Union, after they took ideas from Karl Marx, the breakup of this union gave more numerous ethnicities the opportunity to organize nation states. Again, before Russia, the Soviet Union was the world's largest multinational state, and then after that breakup, it changed. Nation states in former Soviet republics. The USSR consisted of 13 republics based on the 15 largest ethnicities within the Soviet Union. Now, it's important that you get down this grouping as well as these countries in regards to these sections of notes, so make sure you write these down. There were 3 Baltic states: Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. There were 3 European states: Belarus, Moldova, and Ukraine. There were 5 Central Asian states: Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. There were 3 Caucasus states: Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Georgia. And then finally you had Russia. The Baltic states, these were independent countries between the end of World War I in 1918 and 1940, when the Soviet Union annexed the Baltic states under agreement with Germany. The European states. The ethnic distinctions among Belarusians, Ukrainians, and Russians are blurred. They speak similar East Slavic languages, and predominantly they worship Eastern Orthodox. But other than that, the culture of the two different ones, of Russia and European states, are mixed together. The Central Asian states. These display varying degrees of conformance to the idea of nation-state. They provide a reminder that multinational states can be more peaceful than nation-states at some times. And then ethnic Russia during the Soviet Union. Officially recognized 39 different ethnic groups and nationalities within ethnic Russia of the Soviet Union. These ethnicities were clustered in 2 geographic regions. They were, number 1, border with neighboring states. Number 2, they were in the center of Russia. Independent movements flourished and are still flourishing in Russia because Russia nowadays is less willing to suppress these independence movements forcibly like the Soviet Union once was. For example, you have the Chechnyan separatists, these people in Chechnya that are wanting independence, but Russia is not wanting to grant it to them because they have petroleum and Russia wants to hang on to that. And finally, the Caucasus region of the Soviet Union. This is an area about the size of Colorado, and it gets its name from the Caucasus Mountains that separate Russia from Azerbaijan and Georgia. Each ethnicity has a long-standing and complex set of grievances against each other in the region. This is a very highly fragmented region, and you still see that fragmentation going on in this region today.